Oh man, it's nice to finally be here, man. You
It
know,
is. It is nice.
yeah. How was your weekend?
So far so good. I can't remember what I did on Friday. I can actually never remember when someone says, "Oh, what did you do?" I'm like, I can remember the last thing I did.
Right.
But that's about it. But no, good weekend so far.
That's the worst question to answer. It's like I don't know what I did, man. You don't even care what I did. You're just asking me to fill in the space on the Monday morning when at the office. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
just
But
I
I know I had a good. It was a good week. I felt it was a good week. There's a lot of stuff going on. I went to a good show on Canal Street.
mm.
Went to see Walshy Fire do a DJ set.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
How was that?
It was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good fun. It was that night. Thursday was horrendous weather. Do you remember in New York?
Oh yeah. No, that was bad. That was very bad.
Yeah. So I feel probably a lot of people were put off going out, but those that did venture out, I think were rewarded with a suitably fun evening.
Yeah, I had a good weekend. And last week was cool. I got to go to pianos for the first time. I don't know if we can say post pandemic yet, but I got to see a friend of mine perform there. Shout out to Big Stuff Band. It was a really dope show. It's just nice to be back in live music and just experience it. I was at Brooklyn Steel for a show too. I saw Cautious Clay. And
Cool.
he's one of my favorite artists, so that was a treat. It was like a nice little birthday treat that I had.
Yeah.
Earlier this month.
Yeah, there's a lot of good shows. Like I feel like there's tickets coming out every week now that I'm like, oh Jesus, I want to see that as
Right.
well.
Yeah. Well, you were telling me something about you were coming from somewhere about your Uber.
Oh yeah, no, that was last night. That was last
Oh.
night. Yeah, so I was with friends last night. Actually a friend's birthday party and engagement drinks, so something to celebrate.
Yep.
And I ended up going on late, and I was over in the West Village, and I was like, all right, time to go home. How much for an Uber back to Williamsburg, do you reckon?
From West Village.
Yeah, like how much would you, I guess, I've built it up now.
Yeah,
so
like
but how much would you expect that to be?
yeah, I like with surge pricing like a reasonable figure. I would probably say like $40-$50.
Yeah, okay. I was expecting it to be more like 35.
Right.
It was 70.
Damn.
70, yeah,
Well,
crazy.
at the height of the pandemic, it was cheaper to fly to Puerto Rico than it was to take an Uber from Brooklyn to the Bronx. I,
Is that
I,
right?
I spent like $100 on a flight to Puerto Rico, but like with surge pricing, you
Yeah.
could have easily spent $120.
Yeah,
you know,
that's true. That's true.
but yeah, it's just people weren't flying then. But we're slowly coming out of this thing. Live music definitely took a hit, production definitely took a hit. But I have a lot of friends who work in that space and who are musicians and touring. And I know what it's like to be in a band, being a drummer, and it's your bread and butter. Interacting with fans when you don't have that,
Of course.
it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Well, long may it continue. It's spring is about to spring, and I'm hoping that this is actually going to be a really good spring summer.
Yeah, yeah.
So done with winter.
I think it is. I think it'll be good. So let's get into this thing. Why does the world need another podcast? What are we doing here? Well, my name is Tim. This is Jason. We've known each other for a couple of years now, and we both work in the music industry. And we're both avid lovers of podcasting and just music enthusiasts overall. And coming together, we were wondering, like, is there a platform out there where musicians, up and coming musicians, can actually get industry advice in a way that's truly digestible? And there are certain things in the industry, like whether it be websites or just outlets that we like, but it's could be boring to a lot of people who don't work in it. So how do we converse and dissect these topics in a way that's truly digestible to like up and coming artists?
Yeah, I think so. And as you have said, we hope this is going to be educational in many ways and of value to people who, maybe don't have the resources or struggling to find the resources all in one place. But it's also very much we hope to be conversational,
Right.
right?
Right.
You use it's education through conversation.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
like
because
that.
we don't know everything, but your background is in music law, entertainment law, and my background is in music marketing. So we have a bit of knowledge, and we talk to a lot of people who know things as well. So the conversation is going to help us discover new things and hopefully help the audience discover
Yeah.
new things as well.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
that's
so.
important.
And we bring a different perspective. We each have a different perspective, and as we dive into different topics and points of interest for the audience, then I hope we ourselves become more knowledgeable about some of the areas that we are not dealing with day to day in our
Right.
own remits.
Yeah, I think so yeah, through current events in music, we'll pick topics to dissect. We'll later on even have people on. Um and also shout out to our co-producer, engineer, co-host Danny, who
Shout out, Danny.
yeah, who's gracefully letting us use the studio, but he's an accomplished artist in his own right, so we'll have his perspective on here as well. And yeah, we'll just conversation, man, and not pretending like we're the be all end all, but we curate a lot of information from other places and use our own experiences to help educate the musicians, whether you're just starting out or whether you're a bit seasoned and you're trying to figure out your first deals and negotiating and navigating through that space. You're going on tour for the first time, like, oh, like, what team do I build? Like, should I sign this agreement? Do I need a lawyer or a manager at this stage? How do I put out music? These are all questions that we hope to answer and just provide our own perspectives on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So maybe now is a good time just to talk a little bit about each of our backgrounds. We don't need to go into it
Right.
in depth, but yeah, Tim, tell us about how you got into music and what you currently do, your experience.
So I have been a musician for as long as I can remember, starting out in preschool, elementary school, playing the violin and all that stuff, and keyboard, percussion instruments, and eventually I got stuck on the drums. So I went to music school for drums, played in bands, played gigs all throughout the town, and eventually I wanted to study music business because I felt like I could provide more equity for the people that I loved and the music that I loved in the music space, in the industry specifically. Because it's one thing like when you're an individual musician, like a drummer, like I know all of the drummers and the great drummers and like the people who play on the tours, but it's a very like segmented, compartmentalized part of the industry versus versus when you're actually working at a label, for example, or management, you have your hand in sort of the bigger conversation of music, and I've always wanted to start my own label and just guide musicians that I know and I love throughout this whole process. So, I studied music business in school, moved to New York, started working at labels, got specifically into marketing and product management, and, currently cutting my teeth in that. Been working with all types of artists from like legacy acts to pop acts to hip hop. And I mean, it's been a fun ride and, here I am. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah. Well, similar, I always had an interest in music and affinity to music. I think, look, we're human beings. I think, I'd never trust people that don't like music.
Quick story. I went on a date with a girl and she told me she did not like music. It was the last time I ever spoke to her. That was the first time I ever heard that.
I think she's lying.
She's
lying. Maybe she wanted that day.
Yeah, it might have been me. She didn't like me.
But no, I always had like a strong affinity to music, I would say, and then that led to similar. I was always playing instruments. Got into a band. A lot of it was just I don't know if I ever had any serious professional aspirations, but I just loved playing and loved performing.
Yeah.
And then I studied law at university and didn't go straight into it. I actually worked in the drinks industry right after college and had a lot of fun doing that. And it actually taught me that whatever I do, professionally or for a career, I've got to have a strong interest or enthusiasm for the underlying subject matter.
Right.
And wasn't enjoying being a corporate lawyer working in the city. I was in London at the time, but was kind of at the right place at the right time. And the firm I was working for were instructed on Universal's acquisition of EMI. And all of a sudden, I was like thrown in at the deep end, trying to work out how this huge record label worked and operated. And I realized I was getting like insight of like the entire business that would have potentially taken years to learn. So I was just absorbing it like a sponge.
Right.
And then during that process, I met these guys, let's call them music lawyers, music attorneys.
Yeah.
And they were the first lawyers I'd come across. And I was like, oh, these guys are actually fun. You know, they had some amazing stories. I was like chewing the ear off them to like, just tell me more stories about what was that one you was speaking about the other night where you flew to New York and people talking about signing meetings where they'd put it into the contract that 3 people had to be there dressed as the Pink Panther and things like this. So I just realized, right, okay, if I'm going to stick at law, if I'm going to do it, maybe this is an avenue for me to, combine the profession with something that I loved. And so I got into a firm working as an artist attorney.
Right.
From there, I did a little secondment at a record label. It was the first time I'd like worked in-house at a record label. And that experience just like opened my eyes. I was like, I'm actually enjoying coming into work on a Monday morning. Like I can't wait to get to work. And it was just a great bunch of people. You're working with creatives and and yeah, like that sort of made me realize like I'm in the right career. So I've been doing that for some time now. I'm currently in-house working in the legal and business affairs department at a well-known record label. A music company, I should say. They do more than just records.
Right.
And I guess getting an insight that I hope to share with the audience.
No, I think that's a good perspective. And I feel like we need more either musicians or music advocates in the music industry. As crazy as that sounds, not my coworkers specifically, but, I've seen a lot of folks who they could be working in music or they could be working, in banking. They just sort of happen to find a gig working in these industries, right? But you're able to empathize with artists more. You're able to, have more joy in your work when you're actually excited about the things that you're working on. So, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So we can get into the subject matter for today. The first few episodes, we're still mapping out, but we're sort of trying to provide a guide for, okay, let's say you are creating music for the first time. You're wondering, how do I put out this music? How do I market it? And how do I spread it to the masses in a way that makes sense and that's coherent, instead of just creating music and storing it in my computer? Like, what are the steps to get it from A to Z? So that's what these next few episodes we're going to talk about. And the first topic on that is music distribution. So let's get into what is music distribution? What does that term mean?
Yeah. Well, look, I can tell you what it means to me. Distribution, just like in any business where there's a supply chain, you actually have to get the product out there into the stores, I guess, of, it could be retail or what have you, where it is available for people to purchase, right? For consumers to purchase.
Right. Like Coke at Walmart or any product in a store.
Exactly.
Works the same way.
When you're talking about that world of Coca-Cola, there's warehouses, there's distribution hubs, etc. There's trucks that are, running up and down the country. And it used to be exactly the same thing and still is for physical music, CDs, vinyl, etc.
Right. In a smaller capacity, but yeah, it works the same way for that. Yeah.
Yes. But now, of course, much more prevalent to talk about in 2022 is digital music, and it's much the same thing, except, of course, digital means that your music can go to a whole lot more places, a whole lot faster, with much reduced cost. So distribution to me is just how do we get the music out there so that it is available to consumers and fans.
Right. And I think when people think about where music is distributed, they think about the major stores and the major streaming platforms. So you have your Spotify's, your Apple Music's, Amazon Music, Tidal, but there are hundreds of stores domestically and internationally that these distributors have relationships with. So when you sign up for any type of distribution, and we'll break that down later, it's not just those like main platforms that your music is being distributed to. It's everywhere.
Yes.
So that's something to note.
And you know, a lot of those ones we've talked about, those would be familiar to a lot of our listeners. But then, you know, for all intents and purposes, in China, if you're not on NetEase, then you're not distributed in China, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So it's important to be aware when we're talking about distribution partners, you know, what is their footprint, not just in your home country, but, you know, throughout the world, essentially. So
yeah, that's a good point. So let's get into how your music can be distributed, or the different ways it can be distributed. So to break it down simply, you have major label distribution, you have independent distributors, you have actual independent distributors, and then you have direct uploads, or, you know, direct relationships with individual stores. So we could talk about labels first. So yeah, what separates like a label distribution setup versus, you know, an independent distribution setup?
Yeah. Well, look, I think when we're talking about that type of distribution, you're really only talking about three players in the marketplace, which are the three major record labels. So you got Universal being by far the biggest, you have Sony, and then you have Warner. Okay. And I think unlike some of the other forms of distribution we're going to talk about, like really here what we're talking about are record deals, you know, traditional record deals.
The labels are participating in the rights of the records in exchange for not only distributing your music, but also services that the label provides and money that they're directly investing into your music.
Yeah, and like these companies are so huge and have such a market share that essentially they do everything. They're like start to finish. We're going to sign you to a record deal. We're going to pay for the recordings, you know, we're going to do the marketing. We're also going to do the distribution in-house. So they have all of that whole logistics network in-house because they can keep control of it, right? And they're not reliant on third parties. But I think, you know, for a lot of, I should imagine that most of our listeners, this is like a good place to start just to set the frame for the conversation.
Right.
But I think for a lot of our listeners, well, if you get to this stage straight off the bat, you're doing something right. And you've probably got a good team around you who can explain a lot of this stuff and handle it for you.
And it's important to keep in mind in this conversation, we're not advising necessarily yet on like, should you take a record deal or shouldn't you? This is specifically on how to distribute the music.
Exactly.
So, So, you know, whether you find yourself in a position later on down the road to get a record deal, you know, hopefully you have a team by then that could talk you through those steps and like lawyers and all that good stuff. And we'll touch on that topic as well. But record labels is the primary way that, you know, most music that's making money is being distributed today, and it's from those three major labels.
Yes. So I think, look, that's the sort of you know, the pinnacle, in terms of you sign directly to one of these majors, to whichever imprint it might be, and you know, they have incredible distribution networks and systems. And a lot more than that, of course. It's the full gambit of services that you're getting from the label. However, you know, importantly, you will not own your music.
Right.
Like that's that's baked into it. You know, they're funding it. They will own the music. You get your royalties, of course, et cetera, et cetera. And also, because of the investment they're putting in, you will be sacrificing a lot of creative control and your potentially artistic integrity.
Yeah, this is we were talking about this in pre-production, but this is a good point where you are giving up a lot in exchange for what could be a lot or not a lot. It just depends on how successful your music is and your relationship with those labels, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, we're talking about contracts and fulfilling them, and deliveries of singles and EPs, albums, and projects. It is within that label's right to reject your submission.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. If you've gone too much off on a tangent of what your prior body of work was, and it's like, look, this is not your fan. We suspect your fans are not going to enjoy this next record. You've gone off on whatever tangent it might be, or it's not. No, it's too much of the same. You know, we need to move, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And you would hope if there's a good A&R, it's a conversation, and we bring people. But it's not unheard of, and there's been fairly famous cases where people have been stuck in their deals for this sort of reason.
I was gonna say even today you see examples of major artists who are in disputes with their labels, either because they're not happy with the agreements that they signed, or their music isn't getting the attention that they think it should, or the label isn't happy with the current music that is being delivered.
Yeah.
So you find yourself in a sticky situation, but at the end of the day, you are partners with this entity. They've invested the money in you, and if you decide to go be a chef and quit music, it's not like they can come chase you for your checks.
Yeah.
Being a chef or being a banker, it's so they own the masters, yes. But it also comes at their risk of this investment might not make money.
Absolutely, and we don't have to get into that. That'll be for another episode, but that's more often than not, that is the case.
Right.
And but I think this is definitely just to make people aware that that is the pinnacle of distribution in terms of they do it all from start to finish.
Yeah.
However, it's there are some elements you got to think about there, etc. But before we're going to move on, I guess, to the next branch of distribution. But I think it's worth saying that by far and away, these major labels break more international artists than anyone else by some distance. They know what they're doing in that regard.
And strictly from a distribution perspective, they've had relationships with these streaming platforms for longer. They've been here for longer, so therefore, these connections, these chains, or the supply chains they're more used to going through these processes, and the stores, the streaming platforms, they trust the labels more so to pitch music or develop these relationships than they would other types of distributors. But that is changing. But as of right now, that's sort of how it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last point, which is I think interesting, is that of course these labels have huge catalogs, right, which the DSPs, the Spotifys, the Apples, or whatever rely upon. So when it comes to the new music, the frontline music, that's all leverage about, hey, by the way, we're not getting enough love getting playlists, puts and plugs. So more often than not, the major labels, you look at the Spotify curated playlists, which are so important to be on these days. They've got direct relationships and major influence there. Spotify will tell you it's all totally independent and there's no payola or anything.
Yeah,
but look,
that's not true. If a major label artist who has the backing of essentially the entire industry, they're getting radio play, they're getting the press, they have the big partnership deals. When they drop music, the DSPs are going to put them on their editorial playlist. It's not a question of, oh, we pitched it really well on Spotify for artists. No, it's like they have the relationship, so therefore they're going to push these artists.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So look, that's the major labels. I think like the next step down, we've got the independent distribution companies.
Right. And we use that word independent lightly because
because
there are three of them.
None of them are.
Right, exactly. And so it's The Orchard, ADA, and
Virgin,
which was previous. Well, Virgin has been a thing, but it was previously Caroline.
And now they've rebadged it.
Correct, yeah. But these three companies are owned by the three major record labels. So The Orchard is at Sony, ADA is at Warner, and Virgin is at Universal.
Yes.
So it's independent, but it's not really because they have the funding and the infrastructure that major labels do. The difference is now, getting into it, is that they are more selective when it comes to who they distribute. You need relationships with them as well for them to say, hey, we're going to have a distribution agreement with you. But they're not necessarily providing the label services in the same degree as major labels do. And also, they're not participating in your masters. So those are probably the two biggest things when it comes to the difference between the major label distribution and the tier down, which are the independent distributors.
Yeah, when you say not participating in the master, they take no ownership of the masters. Yeah, and often these distribution companies, they are doing deals directly with labels, record labels, like large, very large independent labels, etc., which and then all the way down to smaller labels, etc., and it'll be in return for a percentage of revenues,
right? Revenue split.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there will be a whole bunch of like services, like so-called label services that pitching for playlisting, marketing, PR, even like plugging into their YouTube multi-channel networks,
right,
which increases advertising rates, royalty rates, etc. You can do direct ads. So there's a whole bunch of benefits to that. But again, I think that's more into the world of like you're dealing with labels, etc., and it's big business, not so much the DIY at home artists.
Correct. And it is, those independent distributors are a great option if you're sort of already a bit well seasoned. You have your team put together. You've been doing numbers on the DSPs. You're playing shows. The issue with the independent distributors and even major labels is bandwidth. Because even at labels, if you have a specific label group that's just stretched too thin, getting that support for a newly signed artist is hard. Because
absolutely,
all of the support is going towards the bigger acts. So not everyone who signs a label deal is going to be successful. Just as not everybody who works with these independent distributors are going to be successful. So they do have genuine marketing capabilities, digital marketing services. It's just about the priority. The Orchard, ADA, Virgin have their favorite artists that sort of get the most attention, but a lot of the times they're stretched thin as well. So, you just have to, at least with those two, analyze what situation is best for you and then, make the best decision.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's like certainly helpful to have those services. Whether you want to solely rely on those services is another question.
Yeah, that's well said. It's helpful if it's there, and it might get you a cool brand deal, or it might, create that TikTok campaign that does the right thing to make your single blow up. But I would argue that with any distribution service, do not go to them solely on the pitch of them having marketing services internally. You really need to build your team to help your projects independently of those at the end of the day. Unless you're signed to a major label. And even then,
Yeah.
it's always helpful to have your own team.
Yeah, I think so. And this actually takes us neatly on to the next tier
Yeah.
down, which is, like the true independent distribution services for DIY bedroom artists,
Right.
etc.
Me and you, we can make music together, start a band, and we can directly distribute through these companies.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And this to me, just on a personal level, this is like the most exciting
Right.
like level of distribution, just because this has opened the gateway to millions and millions of bedroom artists, like developing artists with like dreams of making it big and just who want their music to be heard, right?
And
Like
the easiest way.
The easiest way, and the possibilities of, we talked earlier about the distribution, the logistics, the supply chain, etc., where you pretty much had to be signed to a record deal in the past to get your music out there. Now anybody can make music and it's available to be heard, so it's exciting. And so who are the names that spring to mind when we talk about this like true independent distribution?
Yeah, you have at this point there's like a dozen companies, but the bigger ones, and our audience might have heard before, the Distro Kids, the CD Babies, United Masters, TuneCore.
Yeah.
Those are probably the biggest ones, and the differences between them are not very much, to be honest with you. It's more about sort of what benefits you in your current situation when it comes to their pricing models.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's like your situation, because it seems like CD Baby was the first one of these sort of distribution companies to come out, and very innovative in its time, and then TuneCore closely followed. And when I was doing a bit of research on this, what occurred to me was that like every new company that springs up is like, you're more or less getting the same type of result, let's say, maybe varying levels of service, but it seems that like each one came along to, fix a need that the previous one wasn't able to do.
Right.
Whether that was address like the volume of music you wanted to put out. For example, DistroKid, charges like a flat fee and then it's unlimited releases.
Yeah.
So, if you're like a little, like even small label and you're signing artists in your area or what have you, and you want to be putting out like a lot of music, then that's something that you might be interested in. But then, you dig a little deeper, and it's kind of like depending on when you want, there's bolt-on fees, there's fees on the back end, which can add up, to be honest with you.
And you have companies like CD Baby, and being in bands before and groups, I've distributed mostly through CD Baby and TuneCore, but what CD Baby does is they charge you per release. But they'll tier their services based off of where you want your music to be distributed. So, they might still do this, but if you only want your music in like the major stores that everybody knows, at least in the US, they might charge you a lesser fee than if you want your music in the hundreds of stores that are actually available domestically and internationally. So with them, you are paying per release versus a TuneCore where I think you have the ability to pay per release, but their overall model is like a yearly subscription base where you pay, let's say, $100 a year or however much it is, maybe less. And I think it depends on how much music you have up there, but you pay that annual fee for them to keep the music up there.
Yes.
And if you stop paying, then the music no longer exists on those platforms anymore.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind.
I think one important point to say is you've got those services traditionally also took a percentage of your earnings, right?
Right.
So you'd like they call it a commission, and I guess typical would probably be somewhere like 9%, like 9-10%. DistroKid. I mean, it sounds like I'm pitching for DistroKid here. I'm not. I'm just trying to make it obvious that there are differences, and like they don't take like it's 0% on your earnings. You get 100% of your earnings. But however, there are other factors to take into consideration: the level of service, how many releases you're likely to be putting out a year, and what sort of back end fees are there that you're going to like want plugged in, which soon starts to add up. But
and even with the services thing, it operates just like the label services at the Orchard or any of these companies. Like TuneCore, for example, they have marketing services, right? But it's if you are the priority artist, a big part of their marketing was Chance the Rapper, right? It was like Chance the Rapper uses TuneCore, be like Chance the Rapper. You can be as big as Chance the Rapper with independent distribution, but he's also Chance the Rapper, and he also had a team on payroll helping his career out, putting him on tour before he was distributed through TuneCore. So you just have to be careful when it comes to like how these independent distribution companies are marketing their services. And I think we could both agree independent distribution is a very, very good thing. It's probably one of the best things that's happened to enable artists to not have to, go through the labels or, take the fence down and be able to put out music themselves. What we're doing now is just sort of breaking down the differences and just stuff to think about. Do you want to pay a yearly subscription to keep your music up? Do you want to pay per release? Do you want to maybe not pay the money, but also give up, a percentage of your profits from your music? So it just depends on what your financial situation looks like.
Yeah, we were talking about that a little bit earlier, weren't we? We had different opinions. So I was looking into a service which I wasn't as familiar with their terms, but it's 1 RPM, and it was like no fees whatsoever. Great. Okay. Especially for a developing artist. If you like, for me, I want to put as much money into the recording to get like, the actual product that I want, and then the marketing. Right. So ideally I feel at the start, I wouldn't want to pay distribution fees, but they take a 15% commission. So that was like one of the highest ones on the list that I looked at. However, again, you got to look what you're getting for that. They offer playlist pitching, marketing, PR, and supposedly they've got a fairly good, like robust YouTube multi-channel network, which you can get plugged into. You get your YouTube channel plugged into their multi-channel network, and now you're benefiting from enhanced YouTube royalties. They can serve direct ads against your videos, etc. So I guess the point is, well, the question is, but how much am I actually going to get of that?
Right.
Like, because you can't be offering these services to everyone. Like, someone's actually got to sit down and, they can't have all their thousands of tracks being pitched for the same playlist, for example.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that if you're serious about your craft and serious about like making it in music, and I guess it just goes back to what we've been saying is it depends on what is good for you. If your goal is just to put up music so your friends and family can listen to, and you maybe get a bit of buzz, but you're not looking to do it full time, then that's one thing. But, when you sign major deals, you're going to give away enough of your rights already. So for me, it's like giving up 15% to an independent distributor, it's my thing is if you don't have $200 or some amount of money to put up your music or promote your music, then you're doing something wrong to begin with. Work the part-time job, save up the money, and invest in your career as if you're a business. There's nobody on earth is going to invest in an idea, or nobody with money is going to invest in an idea. They invest in an idea, and they also invest in the person and the work ethic.
Yeah, they see the sweat equity that's gone in.
Correct. The sweat equity, the business model that's already in place, and they build up off of that. So, I think it's an unfortunate thing where musicians who want to make it full time can't necessarily create art in a vacuum anymore. You have to be your own entrepreneur. And, for me, it's like, if I'm a label or a brand or, you know, a production company, it's hard for me to invest in you when you haven't put the investment into yourself. And for me, it's like you're giving up 15% to this independent distributor, and who's to say that your music doesn't blow up or that song doesn't blow up a couple years from now? So something that would have cost you $200 in the beginning is now costing you 15%. You know, of your music.
Yeah, well, look, it's a good point. And then, you know, my retort to that would be, well, maybe the 15% worth it for the services that have been provided to get your music to the point to it's blown up. You know, if they actually have delivered on, you know, the services that, you know, are advertised, let's say. But I guess I went through, like, there's actually a really helpful article on an industry website, Ari's Take.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's actually fantastic. There's a table there where all the sort of the regular names, like the regular lineup are laid out across the top, and then all the different what would you call them, like benefits or unique selling points are laid out. You can see at a glance, you know, what the commission rates charge, what the yearly fees are, what the even things like the customer, like customer care response times,
right?
You know, like, because that's a big thing. If something's going wrong and you're trying to get your release out there, and you know you're just talking to a machine, have you? You know,
you're right. And I know there are people that work at these companies, but distributing music on CD Baby and TuneCore, for example, not to call them out, but I've never talked to anybody that's worked there. You know, it's all through the website.
Yeah.
So that's something to factor in as well. If something goes wrong, what is the response time with these companies? I think that's a good point.
Yeah, there's a whole list of things, but that article is like certainly helpful. And actually, one thing that we kind of didn't talk on, but you know, we've assumed that we're primarily focusing on digital here, but it's important to say that, you know, not all of these names will distribute physical.
Yeah.
So
I think most of them won't.
Yeah, like if you got, I know CD Baby do physical, but if you've got your heart set on, you know, a beautiful colored vinyl or something like that,
right? Yeah.
Then you're gonna want to check that they do physical, and that's an option for you.
Another service too that we didn't bring up. A lot of these companies now, or have been doing, admin publishing services as well. So, that's just something to check out. I think they all charge their own different fees. And then Symphonic Music, they make it a point to offer neighboring rights admin services as well. So we always talk about, you hear publishing all the time, but you never hear neighboring rights, or, you know, NROs versus PROs, and Symphonic Music administers that as well for a fee percentage.
Conscious that that's a lot of acronyms there, and people are probably thinking, well, what are neighboring rights? We'll get into that. That's definitely one for another episode. But you're right. I think there's a lot of, as I said, you know, it seemed to be that these different services were springing up, and they're offering like a, you know, we also do this, like a bolt-on service, etc. Song Trader, I think, started out as a sync licensing company, and now they're a distribution service, but they've got a strong sync department, and, you know, by all accounts they do reasonably well on that. So I mean, that's an extra revenue stream, you know, for developing artists, for DIY artists. So.
And I would be remiss to not mention Empire in this discussion as well. So they sort of operate between the independent distributors owned by the major labels and also the DIY distributors, and there's a lot of companies like this where they're sort of boutique in the services that they provide. They're more selective. They have A&R departments who actually go out and find artists to, you know, build relationships with and sign to distribution deals to the companies. And I like Empire because they have a specific niche, which is hip hop. And I think that they distribute other type of artists as well, but they sort of know what they're doing, and they know how to operate in that space. So I think they're doing a really good job.
Yeah, United Masters probably fall into that bracket as well, like hip hop focused, more hands-on than some of the names we discussed. But a lot of the time, you know, to get that hands-on service, it's more like, you know, it's invitational. Yeah, you know, like it's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
They have a pretty good brand partnerships department as well.
Yeah, they do.
United Masters. So, it's just, I think the lesson is it's about going through, seeing what works for you. The last thing I think is important to touch on is payment splitting, right? So if me and you record a track and we decide that we're going to go 50-50 or whatever on the royalties, that sounds fair.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Then, not all of these services can split the payment like that. Maybe you pay some of your money, you put like $1,000 in for the recording costs. Can the first $1,000 go to you to recoup your money before I get paid, etc.?
Right. They don't know. They don't divvy up the payment structure like that.
Yeah. So, some do. And, I think they're, the lesson is like they offer similar services, but with a whole range of nuances, and it's important just to do the research and find out what's going to work for you, both like pricing and structure, commission, etc., but also all the other like services. So I think that's it in terms of those are there are other types of like services we could talk about,
right. And we'll touch on that in future episodes. But I think we did a good job in covering the main ones and the options that independent artists have. Yeah.
So I mean, go and do the research, take a look, get on the websites. I think that's a really good thing. Like I noticed actually one thing that TuneCore and CD Baby, they look like a music website. They got the sort of sexy pictures of the brooding musician, some guitar shots, drum shots, that sort of thing. If you go onto DistroKid, it looked to me like I was buying like a mobile phone plan or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of interesting, but you get a feel for things like that just by going on and checking it out. Have a look around and, get your music out there, I guess.
Get your music out there. Also, follow us at The Record Shepherds on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We'll be posting all of these resources in the descriptions of our episodes. And also email us at therecordshepherds@gmail.com if you have any questions, want us to answer anything, or feedback on the topics. But yeah, thanks for your support, guys, and don't be a sheep.
Take the guidance of the shepherds and be the goat. Thank you.